Welcome to episode 8 of The Aspiring STEM Geek. In this episode, I talked to Nate Wooding. Nate runs the channel The McBobgorge. In this episode, we talk about how Nate got into creating YouTube videos, economics, MrBeast's leaked memo, the YouTube algorithm, hiking, exploring new locations, and much more. I hope you enjoy. Nate Wooding, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Adrian, for having me. It's a pleasure.
And we'll touch on this because the focus of the podcast is mostly going to be about YouTube and YouTube analytics, the algorithm. But your channel is the McBobgorge. Just to put it out there, obviously it's going to be linked in the description.
Yeah, of course.
All right, let's start off from the beginning, like always. You grew up in New Hampshire. Did you spend a lot of time outdoors growing up?
Yeah, I mean, my family, I grew up when I was like 3 or 4, we moved to a suburban development and our backyard was on the edge of it. So it was just like acres and acres of woods. So we'd always go for walks up in the woods and we got a dog and we'd take her up there. But I never really went out and explored too far beyond the neighborhood until like my friend Wayne, he got a Volvo wagon when he turned 16 in 90s, just a V60. And we would just drive around the state. And I was like, this is awesome because I'd never really been to like the White Mountains or anything like that. But there's just some crazy wilderness up there. And we would just, learn from our mistakes, go out there for a day, get drenched, try to sleep outside and run back to the car. And no, it's a really good environment to grow up because, I mean, it gets pretty gnarly up there, but like it's a relatively safe environment because there's a lot of resources and like never had to get rescued or anything like that. That's for sure.
Yeah, not like middle of nowhere Oregon, which I'll bring up later. It's one of your great videos. All right. Well, besides growing up in New Hampshire, I think that, so you were coming of age. There might be Gen Z, kind of when YouTube is like getting towards its peak and getting really popular, and that's what the kids are doing. And you made a lot of videos back in the day. I think squirt gun reviews, stuff like that, random ones.
Yeah.
I think you did like baby versus laser, which I kind of liked. It was just yeah. But at what age did you start making YouTube videos? And then what is your favorite video that you made as a kid?
I think I was like maybe 11 or 12 when I posted my first video. I just had I used my dad's camera. He had some like ruggedized, I think he wanted to bring it diving or something. He's into scuba diving. I don't know what it was, but it was just this waterproof camera and I used it because I stuck a bunch of sticky notes all in one long chain, like all over my living room. And I just did a video of it and it got like 40 views or something over the first couple of weeks. And I was like, whoa, 40 people came to look at my sticky note chain. And I think that's still, you can go back. I think I still have it up. I think my favorite video, me and my friend Joey, we used to do these, or maybe it was me at first and then he joined because I made like 2 or 3 of them, but like Man vs. Wild parody videos, because that was all the rage back then, is you had like, I don't know if you remember Ryan
Bear Grylls, yeah.
Yeah, but there was like so many YouTubers making like parodies, and I was like, this is perfect because Bear Grylls is such like a caricature of himself that even like a random 12 or 13-year-old can just walk out in the woods and use his accent. So I think those are my favorites.
These bear balls.
Yeah. We're 4 days out from civilization. And then I like have the camera pointed at the road behind me and I'm like, oh no. Stupid stuff.
Not to throw shade at Bear Grylls, but I remember my brother was more into him. I watched Man vs. Wild too, but was it that show or another show where they found out like, oh wait, they're actually getting food flown in or something like that?
Yeah, no, that was Man vs. Wild. I think like his idea was like he wanted to show off like the certain situations you could find yourself in, but it just doesn't happen organically. So he would sort of stage it. But I think everything he did in the show was like real, but yeah, it's one of those TV magic type things.
Yeah, I do like Bear Grylls, so I'm not. I was just throwing that out there, but it's setting up the stage for videos is a necessity, as both of us are content creators. All right.
I know.
So, what is your favorite video? That was your favorite video, the Man versus Wild parodies?
Yeah, I think those were good. I remember the biggest one was like an airsoft review, and that one had maybe 30 or 40,000 views after a year. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, that one allowed me to have enough watch time or whatever. I think it was just views back then and subscribers to become a partner. So I was able to I think I got a check from YouTube while I was in high school still. And it was just like, back then there was no threshold. So I think I got like $8 one time. And I was like, whoa, like this is like real money.
That is cool.
And you weren't even allowed to do it as someone who was under 18. So it was all in my mom's name, which is kind of funny. I transferred it over in college, but for a while she was paying all the 1099 taxes or whatever it was on my YouTube earnings. So thank you, Mom, if you're watching this.
Yeah, just accountant charging. That's like, I have another piece of paperwork here. I guess I have to charge you $50 for this $8 1099. But yeah, it's funny. It's also just back to the kids these days. It's I know some of the studies and surveys. YouTuber or content creator is one of the things like, what do you want to do when you grow up? That's first or second most wanted job nowadays. So whenever I meet like a kid, I'm like, I'm living the dream. I'm a content creator.
Yeah, kids are always obsessed when like I talk to them about it, because I mean my parents their friends have some young kids, and just in general they're always like, oh, can we make a video together? And I'm like, sure. But it's also like, I think it's a weird timing because I'm 25 and I think I grew up, and the way it happened is like there were never any influencers or content creators that were my age. They were all like at least 4 or 5 years older than me. And now you have like Ryan Toy Review. I remember that was the one. I don't know if you're familiar. It was like this 8-year-old, and
now his parents he's too old to do it. They're just like forcing him to play with kids' toys. Yeah, I vaguely know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like you have kids who are your age or younger, and you have people who are at all ages now making 6-7 figures on the internet. And I think that might have existed, but I just wasn't really aware of it. And so for me, I never had that aspiration of like, oh, I want this to be a career. And I don't know if I have that aspiration now, but I definitely think like back then it was all for fun, because I didn't make $1 for the first couple of years I did it, and I made like hundreds of videos. So
yeah, no, it is. And one of the things we'll talk about is the motivation why we're content creators. And that's definitely a cool thing to go back like, oh yeah, 12-year-old me. It's like, that is pretty cool to see that. All right. Well, let's jump ahead a little bit. You went to college, Temple University. You studied economics for your undergrad. Why did you choose economics? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I took they had an econ class in high school. And I remember not to sound like an economist, but I felt like I had like a competitive advantage there because normally like I didn't really struggle too much. Like I generally kind of coasted through high school, which was, I guess, pleasant. It was nice. But like I remember in economics especially, people were like having a really hard time understanding some of like the basic concepts. And for me, I was like, oh, this just is intuitive and makes sense. And I had never felt like that in any other class. I always had to like mull it over and study a bit. And so in econ, I was like, oh, this is like simple and it makes sense. And so at that point, I was like, this is probably a good college major because, it generally has some value, although I think I was a little mistaken in the idea that I wanted to be an economist somewhere, because having a bachelor's degree in economics does not make you an economist, that's for sure.
Yeah, but, you usually need a PhD if you want to be an economist, but yeah.
Yeah. But I think it does provide you with like a different way to look at the world in terms of like resources, and it's not a real science, but it is an interesting framework to look at things, and I like that.
Yeah, it's same thing. I dual majored finance and economics, and that's a bit superfluous in itself, but it's definitely the most quantitative of the social sciences, and you'll hear people talk about it, and they have these wild equations and models to try to model the world. And one interesting thing is kind of starting more social sciences, finance, and then going more towards STEM. It's a lot harder to model social sciences or humans because there's just so many variables and different things that you need to think about. You really can't do it with a simple equation. It's just really cool to think about. Just for something like engineering, there's only so many ways that you could build a semiconductor. Don't get me wrong, it is ridiculously hard, and arguably that's not probably even the best example because it is one of the most advanced things that we've ever made. But there's plenty of ways to do it incorrectly, but there's just a few ways to do it correctly. Whereas kind of like modeling human behavior, you really can't generalize it. And that's something that's really interesting, really cool. And as we get more into computation, maybe it'll be feasible, but it's just so hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about how, humans are rational actors in the market, and you can, talk about, if you're working for $20 an hour, like you're going to value that $20 at X amount. But then you turn around and you see people buying F-150s with tricked out setups and $800 car payments, and you're like, why are you doing that? Like, this is not a rational thing. So that's where the social science comes in. And, you have behavioral econ, which kind of models some of those more like psychological factors, which I like that part of econ as well.
Yeah. I will say, just sticking for econ for a little bit, the two concepts that I think are very, very valuable that anybody can kind of apply is opportunity cost. And I really like opportunity cost. And like you, that was the only class. I can't even say I was good at it, but it intrigued me, and I was just so apathetic about everything else. I just didn't care. But I enjoyed econ. But the concept of, even if you get, for example, the really example that people use a lot is you get a movie ticket and it's just given to you, but it's not free because there's an opportunity cost to it. So what's the cost of it? The cost of it is maybe instead of going to the movies, you can work for 2 hours and you collect $15 an hour. So that $30 is that opportunity cost. So starting to not just think about things as being free, but kind of thinking as time as having value in itself. That was a really, really useful concept to learn. And then the whole supply and demand thing. I just think a lot of the market can be summarized. And there's things that can obscure supply and demand, subsidies, and we don't have to go into that. But really, it's the more rare something becomes, the usually more it costs, as long as there is some sort of demand. And there was another example is water versus diamonds. Water, we obviously need it to live every single day. Diamonds, you don't need it, but it's nice and shiny. But water is relatively more abundant compared to diamonds. And getting to the supply and demand, that's also just a really useful and fundamental concept.
Yeah, I agree. And I like how you can factor in sunk costs, or you shouldn't factor in sunk costs as well, because I think there's sort of, like I said, when economics and rational decision making goes against what people actually do, I think people factor in sunk costs a lot. And like you said, they don't talk about opportunity costs. And so having these ideas in my mind, I think it does help you have maybe not a better approach, but a different enough approach to where you can find it works out where you can specialize in something because you understand the value in that, or you can take a different route. You can drop everything and say, I'm pivoting here, even though I've put all this effort into, a finance and econ degree, I've decided I want to pursue Python, right? And so it's like, just because you have this here doesn't mean anything. What matters is the best way forward. And econ is a very forward-looking subject, which I like.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. It's very, very hard to predict. But that's what makes it fun. It's people can kind of be like fortune tellers and make all these predictions, but at the end of the day, most people will be wrong. It's the further out you go, maybe you could forecast something a few months out or quarter to quarter like companies do, but year, 2, 3 years, things are so obscured and the world is so complex that you just can't model it, which again, that's the fun part. That's what makes it cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's the famous saying that economists have predicted 8 of the last 3 recessions. It's just, you can say whatever you want and then whatever happens. But
yeah, there's a lot of crossover between weatherman and economist jokes where it's like at the end of the day, it's the punchline is the economist is always wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get into the main body of this, which is going to be talking about content creation and YouTube. So we're both content creators on YouTube.
I hate that phrase, but there's nothing else you could, like, there's no other way to phrase it. Like, that's what it is. It just feels weird.
It's such a broad term because you can have somebody, I guess on the spectrum of the types of genres, for lack of better word, I try to be more on the Khan Academy side. But then you could have something like yours where yours is a lot more entertaining than my videos, but they're also educational. And then you could just have silly videos like the MrBeast, who's going to come up a lot in this conversation. Yeah. So content creator is a vague term, but I think it, like you're saying, it needs to be purposefully vague.
I always think of the word content as like gray sludge coming out of the content machine, and it's like, that's not what I want to do. But anything else would sound pretentious if I was like, oh, I want to make films, or I want to make instructional movies. It's content. But anyways,
have you ever watched any of Meat Canyon's videos?
No.
Okay, he does kind of horror comedy type stuff. I'll put a link in this description, but he has one about the YouTube algorithm and how he's just cartoon version of himself is churning out all this stuff just to please the algorithm.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah. But your channel's name is the McBobgorge, and I do like your channel name, and I think you did a really good job on your profile picture and the banner. How'd you come up with the channel name?
Yeah, I was like, I get that one a lot, if you can imagine. I was in like 4th or 5th grade, and there was this web game, this flash game called Free Rider. I think that's what it was called. And it was like, Line Rider, the game where you draw and then there's like a sled. Anyways, it's like a black and white. Yeah, it's all those flash games from back then. But I needed to make a username for the website, and I just put down George because I didn't really understand how unique values worked in a database like that. And of course, I couldn't do George, so I was like, Bob George. And I just kept trying random things until eventually one of them worked. And I had misspelled George as Gorge in that last iteration, and I was McBobgorge. And so then when I made my YouTube channel, I made one called McBobgorge, and then immediately forgot the password and made another one, the McBobgorge, and I just haven't changed it. So it's probably not good for search engine optimization or name recognition or anything like that, but it's there, and I like it.
Yeah, no, I do think it's good because you see it, and honestly, when I see it, I don't always do McBobgorge. I was thinking like McBoogie something sometimes when I see it. But it, like you're saying, it is unique. So that's the upside of it. And like my channel name is boring because it's my name, Adrian Dolanay. But the downside of having my name is relatively unique. I don't know of any other Adrian Dolanays that exist in this world. So you can find my stuff. But then that also makes me easier to find, which upside down.
Double-edged sword.
All right. Well, then I was thinking of a way of defining your channel, and kind of like content creator is hard to define. I think your channel is kind of hard to define too. And I think it's cool because you choose to cover some interesting and weird topics. So your most popular video is labeled as the most depressing city on earth. And I think you made a really good argument as to why it is. Highly, all the videos I'm going to mention here, I'm going to link here, and everybody should watch them. And then there's a few other ones I liked. I like the one that you did on the airport on the Libya-Niger border. That was pretty interesting. And then you also made one recently that kind of blew up. It was on the least populated area, specifically within the U.S. and the contiguous U.S. And so in terms of that, do you make your videos based on what you're interested in? Are some of the videos more focused on bringing viewers in that you think they'll like the content rather than you really being interested in it? Or I could say for me, it's sometimes a mix. So I'm just curious how you come up with these topics.
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed over time. Or for a while, I was like just making whatever I thought was funny. And then it sort of transitioned to like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I think more people should know about this. And then I was like, in high school, I made that Russia video, or the most depressing city. Spoilers, it's in Russia. And that one, it's not a very good video in the sense that it's like a couple minutes long. And I made it in one afternoon, and I just threw it up there. And it blew up. It got a couple million views. And I was like, okay, well, people are interested in sort of like these informational videos, and they want to learn things that are also like mind-blowing, or maybe not mind-blowing, but they want to learn about things that they would have otherwise had no idea existed. And so, I still make videos just because I want to, but also now if I'm going to make, some kind of like informational or educational video, I just think about like what doesn't exist. So the last video I posted was about this nonprofit called the AIDS Healthcare Organization. Or the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, sorry. And they're this nonprofit in the LA area that is, I think, very shady. And so I was like researching them because I saw an article, and there was no YouTube video about this organization at all, besides the ones on their channel. And I was like, okay, well, this is something that doesn't exist. I think it's interesting. And so I made it and posted it. And I knew that it's a pretty niche thing, and it's probably not going to blow up. So even though I threw like a flashy title and thumbnail on there, because part of it is you want people to watch it, you're putting this effort in. The other part is like, I have all this information in my head and I just want to push it out there. And so now I don't even think about the AHF anymore because I posted the video and it's done.
Yeah, that's definitely how I've approached some videos too. Is there a lack of content on this specific topic? I think so. I think an advantage that you have in terms of viewership is you can definitely make yours informative and make it a lot more entertaining than something like I can make. Just because on the spectrum, I'm more closer to Khan Academy rather than a famous coding guy is named Primogen. He can be very expressive, and he sometimes does the open face kind of reacting to something. And he's really, really good, but that's kind of not what I want to go for. And it's also, he doesn't code during the videos for the most part. He will, I think he has two separate channels, but for my channel, it's kind of, I have to walk you through how to do this. So it's definitely not going to get as many clicks, but
it's also like people will go to your channel when they want a solution and they don't necessarily want to be entertained. And so what you've done is you've created like a catch-all where it's like, if enough people come back, then you have that freedom because you have the base where people might be more interested in you as a person or you as what are you doing. If you wanted to go that route, you always could. And you have the base now, and you have people who come because everybody's always going to have coding problems for now.
Yeah, until ChatGPT takes away all my views.
I know. It's always... No, I think you're good for everybody's going to want to learn,
Yeah. Well, and then kind of what I've been thinking, I will probably never hit 100,000, and that's okay. But I think if you're going to go more towards the Khan Academy route, you kind of need more content compared to more entertaining videos. Because like you were saying, I think at this point, including YouTube Shorts, have 359 videos posted. And I how many do you have? Do you know by chance?
I think it's at least 200 to 400. I'm probably in a similar range. I haven't posted I don't many shorts at all, so they're all longer, or at least a couple of minutes. But
yeah. So, but I think that's one of those things where if you're going to go more of the strict educational route rather than entertainment route, you kind of need more content rather than having just really good. Or one thing I do want to do, I'm sure you've seen this as well, is those marathon courses that people put on YouTube that are 7, 8, 9 hours. And it's mostly coding topics, like learn how to code in Python. And it's 7, 8, 9 hours. I do want to make a video like that. I do think that'll take some time to do, but I think that is it's less so of I think people are not really going to see the whole thing. Kind of like a typical. We'll talk about this. You'll have a spike at the beginning of a video, then the drop off. It'll be like that. Yeah. But throughout the video, timestamps are such a great creation. I think what people more so will do is click on it and it's like, oh, he's going to talk about creating Python functions, or he's going to talk about classes, and they could just skip to the part that they want.
Yeah, I like those. I've had this running idea, and I've been collecting footage where I just want to make like a comprehensive guide, because I've lived in Los Angeles for 2 years now. I just want to make like a thorough guide to everything about the city. And so I've been gathering footage over the past couple months just when I go to different places or anything. And that's probably going to be an hour or two long. And like you said, it's just going to be timestamps, and people can, watch the 2-minute intro and then click to the part that they're interested in. But I think that's like a good sort of compendium way to maintain a lot of watch hours, because even if you have that drop off, it's still the flat part is still a decent amount of people watching a long time.
Yeah. And it kind of, we'll talk about this as we get to MrBeast and his memo, but it also depends on what you're optimizing for. For my videos, I'm less worried about retaining somebody throughout the whole video, and I'm more, are they getting something out of the video that's useful to them? So for mine, you'll see some more spikes. And I just think one of the many things that I'm very appreciative of YouTube is timestamps. I don't know when they first introduced it, like 5-6 years ago, maybe.
Something like that.
But I just think it's a really good way of breaking down information. And this goes to different content type. So for a more educational video, I think that makes more sense. For more comedy, or even depending on the podcast, if it's just a free-flowing Joe Rogan type podcast where they're just talking about all these different topics and they're funny throughout, you can timestamp that, but it's just kind of not as relevant as something that's you're trying to learn something.
Yeah, there's no like concrete start and end to like a rolling bit or something like that in a podcast. Another thing that I was thinking about is that when I make a video, like an educational one, I always just like have enough information. I keep it relatively dense. I talk relatively quick, at least for a certain extent. And so, I've never made one longer than 20 minutes, not only because it's a lot of work and the script is like 8 pages long at that point, but it's like, I just don't think about retaining somebody for that long. But one thing that I noticed is that my girlfriend will watch these videos that are like 3 or 4 hours about like some random season of a Disney Channel show from way back when, and it's like all the meta politics of it, and like they just go way more in depth. But for some people, and a lot of people, they're not focused, like they're doing chores while the video's on, or like it's background noise. And so as long as you can be interesting enough for them not to turn it off, you can just go on a long tangent or a rant. And it's kind of similar to like a Joe Rogan, where it's like a 3-hour long thing, and most people are not watching the whole thing in one sitting. But I think that's something I want to explore, is like making a video that is multiple sittings long.
Yeah. Well, that's podcasts. I listen to everything from something like a Joe Rogan to political and economic and tech podcasts. And I'll just have it playing, kind of like you're saying. Even when I'm working, I work remotely, so I'm just spending a lot of time by myself coding. And a lot of times I'll just have the news playing in the background. And I one thing I am very, very grateful for is podcasts. I think it is such an awesome medium. And it's one of those things where, I guess I'll talk about it now, but might bring it up later, is one reason I wanted to do this podcast is to have a longer form format to connect with people. And some of my videos are longer. I do have coding or math videos that are 45 minutes to an hour, but the vast majority are somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes. I just think that people can process things better in bites, but having a long form conversation, I do think people can, like, they can listen to it in the background, but they can also actively listen to it. And it's a lot easier to actively listen to a conversation like this rather than a 1 hour lecture.
Yeah. I think also it allows the viewer to kind of insert themselves in it and be like, oh, I agree more with this perspective, or I don't really like that. Whereas a lecture is more like authoritative and you're not supposed to have opinions on it. You're supposed to take it in. And that's not what this is. So,
yeah. All right. Let us hop into MrBeast. So in September of 2024, a memo was leaked that was created by MrBeast and his team. MrBeast's name is Jimmy. I can't remember his last name, so I'll just refer to him as Jimmy. And we both read through it, or parts of it, and I figure we can go over some of the highlights. So I'll bring one up right now. I think the high-level takeaway for me is Jimmy is focused on creating videos that will be boosted by the YouTube algorithm. He has a section called "What is your goal here?" And it states that they want to make the best YouTube videos, not the funniest videos, not the highest quality videos. And I'm paraphrasing what the memo is saying. I'll link it in the description. So I think this is a really great strategy for him because he's trying to optimize the YouTube algorithm, and yet it's a business. You're trying to extract as much money as possible. For my small, relatively irrelevant channel, that's not really the goal. I'm wondering what your take is on this.
Yeah, I think it definitely, going back to when I said content was like this gray sludge, I think sort of what he's doing is not, like he said, he's trying to make the best YouTube video, which is to say the numbers need to be higher. No matter where you are, the goal is to increase the numbers, and the video is secondary to that. So the video is just a vehicle to improve watch time, click-through rate, retention, all that stuff. And so what it comes down to is none of it is what MrBeast wants to make, because MrBeast doesn't want to make anything besides views and I guess money to a lesser extent. But I don't think it's about the money. I think it's about the numbers on the screen. And so when you watch a MrBeast video, it's just about, you are just the number, and it's engineered. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I haven't watched some of them, and they're compelling. It's like you want to see what happens next because he's very good at what he does.
Yeah. He really is. Admittedly, I haven't seen too many just because it's not really up my alley. I kind of the same kind of content I listen to at podcasts. That's kind of the videos I watch. So lots of history channels like Armchair Historian, stuff like that. But I definitely can see the appeal, and he does do a lot of fun stuff that is entertaining.
Yeah, it's like I think MrBeast, realistically, I mean, I think he could make. If he would make a 3-hour video hitting himself with a hammer if that's what got the views and the retention and all that stuff. So it's one of those things where, because I am a human being and he is marketing to humanity as a whole, I mean, I think he makes videos in like 12 different languages. He has all the dubbing and everything. Like, it's just a natural thing that like he's going to make something that I'm relatively interested in at least seeing the results of. And you know, all the high numbers, $100 million, not that much, but, you know, he's done $1 million videos before, and it's all just like very engaging. It feels like you're at a casino and there's the big screen in front of you and you hit the button.
Yeah, I guess I am curious. It would be interesting to pick his brain, but he might say no to this, but I'd love to give him an educational topic that's relatively hard for a lot of people to comprehend, including myself. Like, hey, can you make linear algebra fun? Just to kind of see how he would handle that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting. He has, I don't know if he talked about this in the memo, I don't think he does, but he has a channel called MrBeast Philanthropy. And it's like, he does these videos on the main channel where he's like, oh, we're going to make 50 blind people see again. But there's another channel of just philanthropy where like, there's this other guy that he's hired as like the director of his nonprofit to like go like dig wells and go like buy Chromebooks for kids in Africa. And I think, you know, part of me is like, oh, that's cool that that's what he's doing with his influence. But then there's like the cynical side, which is like, he's aware that like the nature of his videos is going to drum up controversy and it's going to make him a polarizing figure. And he has this subset of like, okay, because I don't want to lose viewership on the main channel, I have this over here that's going to help me show like I'm not a bad person. Yeah.
I could see that. Humans are complicated.
Yeah.
Including MrBeast.
Yeah. Because it is like, I don't know. I mean, it's all cult of personality. Once you get to a certain level, like, I think when my video gets suggested, the average person doesn't know who I am. But once you get to like, 30% know who you are, a lot of it is not clicking based on the thumbnail or the content. It's clicking because it's you, or because it's not you, they're not going to click. And so it's about maintaining the brand as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Over time, I've been trying to build my brand because my channel is my face, but I kind of want to make myself synonymous with STEM topics. So I definitely understand that. And the other interesting thing to read about in the memo was what he and his team found to be the most important factors to make a video go viral. So one of the things he highlighted is having good lighting at the beginning of a video. I'm trying to do that. I'm like buying lighting stands for whenever I'm doing the few times I'm actually on screen. For those listening, Nate's got his lighting bar that he's. So it looks like you might have adjusted that by getting your lighting bar. My lighting's not perfect. I could kind of see the shadow on mine, but it's fine. How have you adjusted some of your videos over time? More so, like you said, you're not 95% of my videos are screen captures, so it's different that way. How have you adjusted your video the way that you make it or capture audio?
Yeah, I think for me, like the easy part of making videos is like the idea and the script, where it's like I have 5 scripts right now for videos that are like almost ready to go. And then the annoying part is like the shooting and the editing and all of that. And so for me, what it means to like optimize it is to make a video that is compelling to watch and interesting, that requires like less work from me. And so a lot of my older videos that I made were like the Russia video or the most depressing city. It's just a blank screen. And then it's like almost like a fancy PowerPoint presentation. And I don't like doing motion graphics, so I just it's very utilitarian. But then I realized that if I just film myself reading the scripts, like in the Oregon, the most isolated place video, that's sort of a background. And people are okay watching somebody talk for a certain amount of time. They like the stimulus, and so I'll put that on the side. But there's not always something going on. And instead of just having a blank screen, which is going to turn people off, it's just me. And so in order to do that, I like to shoot outside a lot. Natural light is nice and easy, and I don't mind walking somewhere where I'm in the middle of nowhere because I like the outdoors. And so that's something that I've kind of begun to do, is really like go out there and film myself. I think for the last video I made, the AIDS healthcare one, it was like a 6-mile hike round trip that I did, and I just filmed it on the side of a mountain, and I was thankful it wasn't windy that day. So,
yeah, it's I recently I did I was thinking about making a video about it, and then I was looking at the video that I had. I climbed a 14er, so for those I forget what it's like 4,267 meters if you're not in the US. If you're in the US, it's a mountain peak that has an elevation of 14,000 feet or above. And the name of it's Quandary Peak. So I was like, maybe I can make a video of this, and kind of like seeing everything, all the wind and everything. And I thought my camera phone, I have a Google Pixel, I thought the light, it would be able to handle the dark better, but it can't. So I was like, I'll make a blog post about this. So I wrote about it, but I was kind of disappointed because this would be cool. My first 14er documenting it. And then I look back, it's like, it's just darkness or wind.
I read the blog post. I think also you have to factor in the cold fingers if you're trying to hit the record button and everything. Manipulating a phone in that weather, it's hard.
Yeah. Oh man, that was I have a few phones, and most of them are Pixels. And like you were saying, there was a part where it's called post holing when the snow is so deep that it comes up to right around your thighs or even up to your waist. And I was trying to take a video of everything was wet. I couldn't click on the record. It was just a mess, and it was tough. But I got some good pictures. But nice. Recording in a mountain setting, I can at least empathize with you there. Or actually, I've kind of seen how hard that is.
Yeah, one way that I track everything is I use two websites. One is called Peak Bagger, and you just log every time you stand on top of a mountain, however you want to get up there. And then I also have one called Caltopo, which is like an online mapping app, but I have like a running map where every time I do a hike, I put it on there. And so, because you can like trace to trail lines, is really useful. And so between those two, it's like if I ever want to go back in time and try to remember something, I can find the date that it happened and then where I was. So
nice.
It's more of a personal thing, but I like doing that.
Have you ever used AllTrails?
Yeah, AllTrails is definitely, it's good. My issue with AllTrails is that like the crowdsourced nature of it is like good and bad, because I'm going
to complain about it in a minute.
Yeah. First of all, people have there's easy, medium, and hard. And people will just say like, oh, that was easy, but you're an athlete. Or that was really hard, but it was the first hike you've ever done. And there's no like uniform scale. So I don't know. AllTrails is good and bad.
Yeah. So one reason I did Quandary in wintertime, and it's for many reasons, it's a lot harder to hike to a peak during winter. You have snow, you have ice, it's freezing, less sunlight. So I was reading a lot because first 14er, I don't want to get stuck up there. I don't want to lose toes or fingers. And I was just reading the reviews, and most people said that the trail is relatively straightforward. And during the first hour and a half, I got to a point, there were two other hikers, and we were going pretty much the same way. It seemed like there might have been a few different trails, and they started to go straight where AllTrails was taking me to veer left. And I was like, oh, they must be doing another trail or something. So I was following AllTrails, and within 5-10 minutes, I'm post-holing. I'm up to my waist, and I wasted probably an hour following the AllTrails route rather than kind of sticking with those two hikers. And that it took so much energy out of me that I had to stop at least 20 times before towards the top of the peak, because I was just so tired from all the post holing.
Yeah, the elevation will do that to you too. 14 is no joke. I've never done a mountain that high, but
yeah. Well, you have Mount Whitney in. I don't know how close it is to LA, but it's in California.
It's a 5-hour drive. There's a really strict permit system. So they do during the month of February, you pay $15 and enter a raffle, and you put in the dates you want to hike it. And so the past 2 years I've done the raffle and I haven't gotten it. So fingers crossed in a couple of days I'll be able to do Whitney. But there's a lot of other 14ers. I think there's like 8 or 10 in California. So
yeah, no, it's worth it. Also Colorado, they have, I think 54 roughly. Yeah. And I have to say Colorado is one of my favorite states. And
for sure. No, I've done, have you heard of the Colorado Trail?
Actually, no.
It's I think it's like 500 miles. It goes from Denver to Durango through all the different ranges. And when I was in college, I flew out to hike it. I did the first 100 miles from Denver to Breckenridge, and then I was post-holing through thigh-deep snow in June, and I was like, I can't do this because I have shorts. I wasn't expecting that much, so I bailed, but I'll go back one day and finish it for sure.
That's awesome. Just the last thing I'll say is Quandary Peak. It's 5-10 minutes away from Breckenridge, and I stayed in Breckenridge the night before doing it. Cool, super cool ski town. Lots of, if you want to fit in, just buy a beanie and you'll be good. All right. Well, kind of pivoting back to the YouTube analytics side of things. So I'm bringing up the MrBeast memo again. So he highlighted 3 metrics: click-through rate, which is the number of times users view your video relative to the number of impressions or times your video is shown to users. Then you multiply that by 100. You have average view duration as the second one, which is the total time viewers spent watching the video divided by the number of times the video is played. And then there is the average view percentage, which is the total watch time divided by the video duration, then multiplied by 100. I have those equations thrown up here if anybody wants to dig into them. But have you focused on any of these metrics, or I guess any metrics at all, when you're making your YouTube videos?
So I focus on the metrics in I think a different way, where instead of focusing on the metric itself, I just look at how different videos have performed relative to that. And I try to, take in some of the info because, for me at least, I don't really care if I mislead someone into clicking a video, which sounds bad, but it's I think that if I'm making something, I want people to know about it regardless of who they are or what they do. If I was in an entertainment only position, I think that might feel a little shadier, where it's okay, well, you sold something else. But that just means making a compelling title and thumbnail. And also, I think, because that's the 2 things people see before they click, is the title, thumbnail, and also the length of the video. And so if the 3 of those, I think, are pretty important. And then once they click, they just want to be thrown into it. I think that's the biggest thing. And MrBeast is really good at that. A lot of people do long intros, and I think you can only get away with that when you have a dedicated, like I said, cult of personality, where people like you for who you are and not for the content.
Yeah. And speaking of the long intro, the memo also focuses a lot on the first minute of the video. And that makes sense because that is when you have the most viewers, right? When they click it. And it highlights, and one of the things he talks about is you need to make it really engaging to retain viewers. And for myself, it doesn't really work for my genre because, like I said, for example, most of my videos are educational programming videos. I have to take the first minute to highlight the language I'm using or the tools I'm using so that the users can code along with me. Maybe there's a way to make it entertaining, and I haven't really thought about that. But I'm also trying to do more of a Khan Academy style than a 3 blue, 1 brown video. But when it comes to your videos, have you thought about a strategy of, I have 30 seconds to a minute to 2 minutes to kind of hook somebody in so that they view it? How have you approached that, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I'm writing a script for something, and obviously I have made some more vlog style videos, when I travel to random points and states and that sort of thing, which maybe we can touch on that later. But if I'm doing just a talking to the camera video, I think I either have some sort of a hook where it's I just present a question that needs to be answered, or something interesting or bizarre is going on. And I do that. In the Russia video, I think I don't even know how that one starts. So 1 minute is also a quarter of the video itself. So that was a short one. But it's more you want to grip them in some way. Other times it's kind of just summarizing what's going on in the video. And then for that, it'll be enough for them to they'll have questions that they want answered. But I think that's you have to get them to care. And however you do that, I think there's different strategies. If you're doing a MrBeast video, it's the scale, right? You come in and he's yelling, I have $250,000 in a briefcase and I'm going to run over it with a snowblower unless he jumps across. You know what I mean? That's enough because he has the scale. But if you don't have the scale, you have to have a story.
Yeah, I'm coding. I'm trying to think like, maybe I could threaten to destroy some sort of PC, and then you have
this Python function will change your life. Yeah, I mean, it's only so you can't do that much.
Yeah, I think people try, and it's kind of like that. I guess I will say it's like, no offense to anybody that does this, but the coders that do the open mouth. And it's like, I'm sorry, what we do isn't exciting. You could probably actually boost some views that way, but at the end of the day, I just think it's silly.
Yeah, I have a friend and he's like a polyglot, and so he makes videos about language. And in that sphere, like there's like a big community online, but you kind of, if you're not in the polyglot world, which I'm not, you're kind of only exposed to it. And I don't know if you've seen these videos, but it's like the title's like white guy goes into Cantonese restaurant and stuns waiter with perfect yeah. And so he saw that and he's like, there's got to be something else. And so, I mean, he just hit 1 million subscribers last year.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he quit his full-time job as like I think he was like a biomedical engineer or something to make these language videos. But he sort of just...
What's the channel name?
It's called Language Simp. You can throw that in the description.
Provocative title too.
Yeah, exactly.
Or channel name.
And so I think it's interesting what he did was he just found this niche where it's like there's a lot of people interested in learning languages, and you'd think the answer would be to make language tutorials, but instead you can do like this meta commentary, and he really hams it up, and it's pretty funny, even though I don't care at all about being a polyglot. It's interesting.
Yeah, that is cool. So since we're talking about this, one of the things that the video talks about and that I can relate to is that Jimmy, or MrBeast, he does a lot of translations into different languages. Because if you look at the YouTube audience, if we're in the United States, so a lot of times you're just focused on your own country, but the most viewers are from India, and I think either it depends on kind of how you view it. For my channel, I think the majority, or almost, in terms of rankings, India is 1 or 2 for me, for my viewers. But being able to translate your video, it costs a lot of money. He's hiring somebody to speak in Spanish to translate it from English to Spanish. But I think there's a lot of value in that. And I know I shared with you, I don't do translations, but I have a Python script I put together that will take a YouTube subtitle. One of the other cool things that YouTube does is after you upload it, and I think it probably doesn't do this for every language, but English, most spoken language, YouTube will translate the video or actually create subtitles for you in your native language. And what my script does is it takes that, uses a Google Translate API, and it translates it to 120, 130 plus languages, which I've gotten, for the most part, people like, it's not the best, but we can understand what it's doing. And that helps kind of expand the audience. Is there anything similar that you've done to kind of try to reach more people? And it doesn't have to be translation, but just to this could even be more of a topic where like, I think if they saw this video, they might also just be interested in my channel in general.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of ways you can take it, because especially if you're making like instructional content, I think it's important that you cast the most wide net possible. For me, I think it's a little different because like if I'm interested in making a video about, for example, somewhere in the US, like the least populated part of America, odds are like a Peruvian is probably not going to care that much about it. Just like if I made a video called the least populated part of Peru, and Americans may not watch that. I may have to do some kind of different spin on it, call it like South America's greatest mystery or whatever it may be. So I think a lot of it is like, if you could do a different title and thumbnail depending on the region, that would be huge. I think the auto captioning is generally good. Like you said, the way it transcribes, but it just does it into English. Although I think now they're rolling out a feature where it auto transcribes to other languages too.
That'll be awesome.
I think it's only for some, or it's like a beta. I saw something, but anyways, I don't really do anything, to be honest. I make videos. Thankfully, I'm fluent in English and that's what I know. And that's like probably the best language to make videos in because you can capture all of Europe and North America. And also, I mean, not to put like my cynical hat on because like a viewer is a viewer and teaching somebody something is important. But like I would rather people in the US and maybe just the Western world are aware because, you know, if my goal is, for example, to protect Eastern Oregon and its natural beauty, you know, somebody in, I don't know, Bangladesh may find that interesting, but they don't vote, they don't go there, they can't really experience it at the frequency at which someone in the US might. And so it's like, I have sort of not a hyper local view, but like I'm more interested in the local aspect for sure.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it just goes back to the difference in genres, but mine is way more abstract. And as long as you have, I mean, you can have a Raspberry Pi and kind of, if you can access my videos through a mobile phone, you can follow along. But hey, that's why we're content creators.
And also, to put my cynical hat on before we move on from this topic, a view in the US is worth more in terms of dollars too. The AdSense algorithm is like, it looks at buying power and spending and all that. And so like going back to the language friend is like his Hindi content gets a ton of views, but it makes less money than his other stuff because the purchasing power of someone on the Indian subcontinent is so much lower relative to someone in the Western world.
Capitalism. I think
MrBeast, it makes sense because he's run out of people in America. I think you could ask your grandma who MrBeast is, and there's a good chance she'll know. You know?
No, it is. It's also funny because if you look at MrBeast is one of the people, but if you look at what the top videos are, it's almost always music related. So it's like, God, I remember when Gangnam Style, I forget how to say it, came out, and that had billions of views and people are going wild. It's like, oh, I can't believe it hit it. But if you look at it, it's the top videos are always music related. Justin Bieber or Beyonce or Rihanna, they're the top. They're the ones that get the most eyeballs.
Yeah, I think music is like a universal language. If I could make my videos in music, I think maybe they would do better, but I think that might be a tough challenge.
Yeah, I think it was when I was in high school that the I forget what it's called when you electrify a voice and kind of make it into a song.
Like auto-tune?
Yeah, auto-tune. It's like the Antoine Dotson, and he came out. They're climbing. Man, I'm not gonna do it because I can't. I would sing it if I could remember, but I don't want to do it injustice. But it's.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know that was really popular, or just started to get popular when I was in high school. All right. So another thing the memo highlights, it's important to have a backup date for filming. For most of my videos, I'm screen recording. And there's not really any filming issues that I'll run into. However, when I started the podcast, the people delay or cancel. So I do need to have either backup dates or backup guests come on. Were there videos that you were trying to make that you needed to have a backup date to film? You mentioned that filming on a mountainside is tough. You ever climb up a mountain, then it's just too windy. It's like, okay, I gotta climb up here tomorrow.
There's sort of that aspect. I think the bigger thing for me is like making time in my schedule because I have a full-time job. And so it's not like if YouTube was my full-time job, then I'd sort of run into these issues. But for me, it's like, okay, I have to get this video shot this weekend. Otherwise, I'm just not going to do it. So it's like, I'm going to make that work. And so, you look at the weather, if it's raining or something, or you're like, okay, I'll just go here. I'll just make compromises. But I think that's the biggest thing is like, I would rather make a compromised video than no video and sit on it. Cause I would go through periods. I think there's certain years where I haven't posted a video. And it's not that I haven't had ideas. It's just that like, I wanted it to be perfect and I've sort of moved past that.
Yeah, I can definitely empathize with that since you're actually recording yourself and you there's a lot more factors. For me, luckily, screen recording and making these programming videos, it's a lot more modular in that what I've kind of ended up doing is I'm coding and I just record myself coding. And then I do the voice part of it separately. So I'll record the audio separately from the actual screen capture. At first I was doing everything at once, and then for me, I am closer to, I want this to sound as good as possible. I can't have any ums, uhs, or unnecessary pauses. I'm trying to just make the clean cut video, and I'm able to do that and spend more time on that because I don't have to film myself doing it. And I can actually, because it would be weird if I was filming myself and you all of a sudden see it jump to me looking a different way. Mm-hmm. But that is a huge advantage for screen capture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just in general, like there's these sort of like shortcuts you can take to like, and so like for example, if going to like short form vertical videos is like, there was a while where like I was 90% of the stuff I put on the internet was on TikTok actually. And so
RIP,
like
maybe.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going, but and so, you know, I've posted hundreds of TikToks as well because they're so easy to make and they're quick. But what I realized is that, like, you know, I would post on TikTok and, you know, it would get 300,000, 400,000 views. I think I have more subscribers on TikTok or more followers there than I do on YouTube. But the issue is that, like, an idea would pop into my head. I could make a TikTok about it and then I would forget about it. And that would be like the catharsis. That would be like, oh, I showed people, see? But in reality, like, you can't go into a deep dive doing vertical video. And so a lot of people use it as like a way to funnel viewers to somewhere else where they can either make more money or go more in depth. And I never did that. I mean, my TikTok is not even the same username as my YouTube channel. So I haven't posted on there in a couple months or maybe even a year now. But that's kind of a big mistake I made.
Well, I guess since we're talking about this, and then I'll return to the last thing about the memo is, I like you said, for your YouTube channel, I just double checked it real quick before we started. It looks like you only had 3 YouTube shorts, and I've actually utilized it a lot where there are a lot of small utility things with either programming or even kind of that's kind of where I've gone more the edutainment type thing where one of the things that I also enjoy doing this is I like bricking my computers, and I start something called a virtual machine. And it's just a software program that lets you emulate a computer. And something fun that I like to do is break the machines. So what commands can I run to totally destroy this machine? And that's where I've made some fun videos. And you know, Benny, I forget, is like da 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 da, that
the sounds,
yeah. So I run that, and that's kind of the edutainment side of it. And because some of them are also unrelated, they're more fun videos. Like I actually put up a video this week of a trip that I recently came back from Thailand, about an island that I got to visit. But are you thinking about, as TikTok from the US might be gone in the next 90 days, we don't have to get into that too much, but do you think you're going to try to utilize YouTube Shorts going forward?
I'm not sure what I want. I've thought about it. There's like I said, I have hundreds of TikToks, and so I've thought I need to find if there's a way to bulk download them so I can just throw them up on my YouTube channel, because most of what I did there was more like social commentary and sort of like that thing. And also a lot of my TikToks are longer than a minute, because after a certain time you could do 3 or even 10 minutes.
Yeah, I do think that they've boosted. I think it's either 2 or 3 minutes now for a YouTube short.
For YouTube Shorts? Okay, yeah. Interesting. Because I remember like maybe a year or two ago, I started to post and I was like, oh, I can't post that. It's 3 minutes. I can't post. So
yep.
I'll definitely have to look into it. And I think what I might do is just roll them out on like a scheduled release, just so I'm posting some things, and attention on YouTube Shorts is better than nothing. And so people might click on my channel to see what else I'm doing. So I'll have to experiment with that. It's something I've neglected for sure.
Yeah, well, one thing, I'll post up some of the graphs here, is kind of I've always kind of looked at it, the views. You could at this point, I've made well over 100 YouTube shorts. I probably made somewhere around 150, maybe even more. And for a lot of them, you'll have kind of this, what I call a sugar high, is you have a big spike on the release of it and then just a plateau in views. Yeah. And that's kind of what I found for some of the ones where they're more fun ones. Like I've done a lot of, I'm sure when you've gone on Google, you looked up some of the Easter eggs. Like there's a Rick and Morty Easter egg that you can find if you look up Wubba Lubba Dub Dub. And it gives you one of those things. It's like, did you mean that you're in pain and need help? So yeah, like fun ones like that. Yeah. So those will get a good spike, but then they plateau very quickly. Some of those will get a little bit of views. But what I've found is for some of the ones that are more just kind of like my other ones where I'm showing people how to do this, it's like, oh, how can I create a new directory or folder with Python? Is over time, those have actually gotten a significant amount of more views. And people are actually, instead of that being shown in the YouTube Shorts feed, a lot of people are YouTube searching for it. So it's kind of interesting to see the differences between the two. And for a lot of my videos, you'll have not so many plateaus, but for my longer form videos, it'll be like 1 or 2 views, maybe a week for the least viewed ones. But for the most part, the longer format videos have just more steady view rather than the YouTube Shorts, but it does vary by short type.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the YouTube Short algorithm, but I know the TikTok one is really, really manipulative, because what it'll do is, like, if you haven't had a video do very well and you start to like slow down in posting because you're kind of demotivated or whatever it may be, it'll throw you a bone and it'll just shove your video out to a lot of people, because that's the beauty of it, is you don't have to click on it. There's no human, like, you get shown what you get shown and it counts as a view. And so there's a lot of like, false hope that I noticed with TikTok, and I think it's probably similar with YouTube Shorts, because I mean, they're all kind of the same mind games and psychology.
Yeah. So I mean, I've kind of, I'll do fun ones still and more on the edutainment side, and I guess I'll talk about this more once we get into the motivation. But in terms of actual YouTube Shorts, I've kind of been like, okay, so these might not get the biggest spike, but over time, people are actually searching for it. And a lot of these things, you don't need a 3 to 10 minute video explaining how to do this, like utility, like creating a file or creating a folder with a programming language. It can be summarized within 30 to 60 seconds. And people are actually clicking on it instead of the Shorts feed. So going forward, I think I will mix it up, but 80-70% of them will be more focused on that, kind of what I'm doing in the long format as well.
Yeah, I guess that's like, it's a fun way to play around, and it takes much less time to make a short and upload it. And so you can kind of just toss your feelers out there in different areas and see what people like and what you like.
Yeah. All right. Last pivot back to the MrBeast memo. Oh, yeah. Okay. I mentioned this earlier while we were talking. He does the big open mouth thing, and I actually, I can't stand it. And I'm really glad I actually found this tweet that he did a little over a year ago, where he had all of the thumbnails where he has the big open mouth look, and then he made a bunch of other thumbnails where he has a big smile. And what he found is that the closed mouth ones did a lot better than the open mouth ones. So if anybody here's a content creator, you're doing the open mouth thing, you should take a look at that, because I never liked it. And if you're in the entertainment section, sure. But again, if you're a coder, programmer, mathematician, statistician, please stop. You are not interesting. I'm sorry. We're not interesting. Let me say that. I'll throw myself in the boat. We're not fun. It's just you're there to teach people. All right. I'm done.
I don't think I've never had a gaping mouth reaction to, I think, anything that I've posted, and I think most people are like, "Oh, that's cool." maybe a smiling face if you really got to put your face on the thumbnail, but keep it toned down. Come on.
Yeah, no, I'll generate a thumbnail from the video here where I kind of like one where if one of us says something funny and we're laughing, it's a natural thing, but kind of forcing it where you just look like a shark. Yeah. Yeah. Stop. Yeah. Please stop. Okay, so we spent a good amount of time talking about what Jimmy or MrBeast thinks is a good YouTube video. What is your take on what makes a good YouTube video?
I think, and maybe I have more of like a hopeful or optimistic view of what makes a good YouTube video, but sometimes I watch a video and I think about it afterwards, and I think that's huge. Like if you can just plant the seed of something in there, or if I watch a video and it helps me like go forward with something, it like clears a roadblock for me. So I think there's sort of different ways, but at the end of the day, a good video achieves the goal of the person making it, and I just think it has to be a good goal, because I think when the goal is just to get people to watch it, it's not really a noble cause. So that's more of like my holistic view or my optimism about the human race. But
hey, I agree. There's some interesting history ones. Like I was listening to less of a more pure history, more of a actual. I'm also into like military books, things like that. But there was a really good podcast where I'll include it here. They were talking about how the U.S. military was fighting in the Korean War and how that was the first war after World War II that was pretty large scale. And they were talking about how that's the first time that they implemented sending people home after 6, 10, 12 months of being in the battlefield. And that was also implemented towards the end of World War II, but that was really prominent in the Korean War. And it was a really good analysis where one of the factors of why the U.S. military wasn't performing as well, at least according to this historian, is you would take your most battle-hardened soldiers, send them back home, and then you'd have just a fresh set of troops that are seeing combat for the first time, and how that the U.S. military at the time was fighting North Korea and China, and they had their battle-hardened people there the whole time, and all that experience was retained. Whereas on the U.S. military side, and I guess on the UN side too, I don't know how the UN troops did it, but I assume it was probably similar, where you were removing experienced people and losing that knowledge. So, but yeah, no, I definitely learned something, and that's kind of the latest podcast I listened to. I was like, oh, it's interesting concept, among other things that they talked about.
Yeah, and it's also something that you can apply to like a normal setting or like a peace setting where it's like, okay, well, knowledge management is really important for any organization, and so preserving what you have without wearing out who you're using, it's like it goes a long way, and I think that's why it's like a universal lesson often.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some of the equipment that you use. So it goes back to, well, what kind of camera do you use? I know you showed us your bar lighting there for audio.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
I might really grab it. Hold on one second.
Well, I'll cut forward.
Most of the videos that I shoot are on the Fujifilm X-T3, which is just like a mirrorless. It's a couple of years old now, but I have a zoom lens on it now. I also use a wide angle for most of the shots, and then I have like something a little more portraity. And then the biggest thing actually that I think is more useful than the camera is the tripod. I have the Peak Design tripod, which is huge because it weighs like not that much, and it's super sturdy, and so it lets me shoot wherever. And then some of the stuff is on GoPro too. I have a GoPro, 12. So this one is good if I just, I've been using it to carry it around in my pocket and get shots of the city for that LA video that I've been working on. But yeah, I think most of the time the camera is not I think this camera is probably like $500 or $600 on eBay. It's not some crazy expensive machine, but it gets the job done.
Yeah. What do you use for the audio for the camera or on your GoPro?
Normally what I do on the GoPro, I'll just use the built-in audio, or I'll just use it for visuals. I'll dub something or something over it. For the audio, I'll have my phone normally in my pocket like this, and I'll just have it record a voice recording.
Okay.
And then I'll just sync it up in post. And it does a pretty good job. I think maybe that's my next investment, is like a Bluetooth mic, like one of those Rode video mics. But for now, it works for me.
Yeah.
And then I also have Blue Snowball if I'm doing like a desk recording.
Gotcha. Yeah. For the longest, I still will use it, the Blue Yeti, for a lot of my videos. And it's for my screen recording. I use software called OBS, and it's pretty much open source. And that's what I'm using now to record this. Then I think you mentioned this, but for post-production, I use Premiere Pro. You use that as well, right?
Yeah, I dabble in After Effects as well sometimes for motion graphics, but I'm really bad at it. And so it's more like I pay for it, so I feel like I ought to use it. But yeah, Premiere and Photoshop are like the two biggest ones.
Yeah, it is expensive. I do use both, but I mean, maybe it's because I've been using it for 3 years at this point, but I do like Premiere Pro. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you could do. Like for this video, the intro, what I've done for my podcast is I bought the big green screen in the background. So it's 10 feet by 12 feet. I have it hanging up on a wall. And that great thing about YouTube, lots of tutorials that shows you how to. So trying to setting that up, but I guess the toughest part is the lighting in the room and trying to get that as good as possible. But the green screen, that is a cool effect to do. And for these intros to the podcast, I'm doing them on green screen. I'm doing a quick 1-minute summary of what we'll talk about or what we have talked about. But Premiere is such a cool tool to have.
I also use Google Earth Studio, which is like a web app that they have that lets you do flyovers, because a lot of my videos are about the geography of somewhere. So I use that a lot.
Is that similar to Google Earth Pro? Because okay.
I think it's just like the more modern version. It lets you keyframe and it has like a timeline, and so it's a bit more user friendly. I don't know if it's it was in beta when I joined, and so I had to like ask for permission to use it. I don't know if it's out now in public, but
okay. For your Oregon video, did you use that?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't own a drone or anything, but it basically supplants the use of a drone, and you don't have to worry about flying in protected airspace or any of that stuff.
Yeah, that I will say that is, I have bought a drone, but I lost the controller, so I haven't even tried it out. But I do want to kind of mess around with drones, and luckily you could get them for relatively cheap. And a lot of the areas, I know in your video you mentioned the land in that part of Oregon. A lot of it is Bureau of Land Management. I assume it's okay to fly in public land, but there's a lot of open spaces where it's probably okay to fly.
No, I think generally, more than likely you can. I just like to do it obviously away from people, so I'm not annoying them. And then also, I mean, on BLM land, you can do pretty much anything. Like, people go out there to shoot, they go out there to off-road. You can camp in one spot for like 2 weeks and nobody will tell you to move, but drones are definitely okay.
Yeah, and that's for those outside of the U.S. A lot of that is the western side of the U.S., at least I think, and that is the cool part of it. I mean, your video has inspired me. I've wanted to go to Oregon and Washington, and like always, like everybody, just very busy. But I'm hoping sometime this year I can make it out there, do some hiking. This is obviously Washington, but Mount Rainier, that's on my to-do list to hike that.
No, that's a cool one. I've never done any of those big volcanoes up there, but there's Mount Shasta in California that's on my list too.
Yeah. All right. Recently, I was asked why I have a YouTube channel, and I've kind of hinted that I'll bring this up throughout the podcast. So for me, it's a variety of reasons. Initially, it was to create a portfolio of my work to show how well I could program and demonstrate not just my knowledge, but also my growth over time, I'll still reference some of my own videos when I'm coding because I did a relatively good job in summarizing it. I also like to help people troubleshoot an issue. I think I could say that YouTube got me interested in teaching, and now I'm teaching at a community college. And then another reason is ego. I do get a boost knowing that people find my videos helpful. There are other reasons too, but the final reason I'll highlight, at least for myself, is I could look back at my videos 10, 20, 30 years from now and appreciate them. For example, I made more of a fun video where me and a few of my friends, we launched a balloon into the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. So that whole experience, it didn't get a lot of views, but that whole experience was really cool. And I could tell you just kind of like going through the woods and trying to find that with friends, and then actually finding it, and then like having to go back multiple times and actually getting the camera down. That was just such a awesome experience and a great feeling. But why do you make videos? And why do you make videos?
I guess I kind of see it as like YouTube is kind of like my podium of choice if I want to speak to whoever wants to listen. I think there's some things, if you find something that you want to share, or you do something and you want to inspire people to do it. I mean, I've been posting for a while, and for a while it was like I wanted to make people laugh when I was like, in middle and high school. And I think there's still a little bit of a fun element, but it's not like a comedy channel. And so it changes over time, just like I have. I think it's sort of like you said, like a journal or like a timeline where you can see the things that I'm interested in and at a given moment. And I've been posting for I think half of my life, if not more. So I'll continue to do it and go in phases and waves and see what people like, and post things that I know that won't get that many views, but I want to post it. And the ones that do get views, I make money, so that's always a plus. Paid for a lot of Chipotle in college. That one video about the most depressing city, that's for sure.
That, admittedly, that is one of the motivations, but my channel is significantly smaller than yours. So right now it's just covering the cost of the Adobe subscription for me.
Hey, that's something, it's a perpetuating, and eventually, you get the ball rolling. And if you have a big backlog of videos, I think it goes through phases, but I'll have videos that are like 10 years old and they get 30,000 views, and all of a sudden I get a check in the mail. So it's always fun, and it's still out there, and some of it is bad, and maybe I don't necessarily regret posting it, but I'm like, hey, like, disclaimer, I made this when I was 16, so what did you do when you were 16? But I'm never going to take them down, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, this might be a tough question, might not be. What do you think is the best video you have made so far?
Oh man, if we go with the MrBeast answer, it's just the most viewed one. But I think best video is an interesting one. I think it is sort of a tough one. If I go back long enough, I think my favorite is actually one that I never even posted publicly. It's unlisted because we haven't talked about this, but I have a series that I've put on hiatus where I go to random points within a location. So I'll, take a state.
Within the US, like Utah or Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'll generate, there's a website that lets you draw a rectangle and generate a random set of coordinates in there, and then I'll do one, and then I'll go there. And the one in Delaware was in the middle of this swampy marsh. And so, I went to college in Philadelphia. I was only like an hour away. So I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I'll go down there. And it's surrounded by private property, so I'm like trying to find a way to get in without getting shot. And then I get in there, and then I realize, like, oh, I'm only 100 yards away, but it's just swamp. Like, I'm gonna have to swim. Like, it's like deep water marsh type stuff. So I come back with like better gear, come in from a better angle, and it's still done. So I want to go back and actually do it. But I think that's like the most interesting is when it's like a real challenge. Some of them are easy. You drive 4 hours, you get out and you stand there. But that one is like the first one where I really had trouble and still haven't done it.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, some of the ones I really enjoy and haven't. I guess this gets into the problem of the YouTube algorithm where if you look at the how do I make my YouTube channel bigger kind of video content where YouTube content creators try to give you advice, they're like specialized in something. But Like, yes, that is really good, but that's not the only thing I want to cover. So, for example, about a year ago, I went to Vietnam, and my favorite thing that I did there was I visited there. It's an area where there are a lot of monkeys, and they have to take care of them because it's in a mangrove. Humans have to take care of them. So because they can't really get access water that easily or food, the locals and even the government, they donate bananas and everything like that. And I made a video of that, and I look back at it, I was like, oh, this is so cool. But because it's not coding related, and then I'm planning on making another one about another recent vacation where I went to Thailand, and I got to hang out with elephants, and that's just talk about Asian elephants. And highly, if anybody wants to go to Southeast Asia, it's such a cool place. But yeah, it's a little, I guess maybe a bit of a tangent, but
no, I mean, I think like for me, like at least for you, like your channel is your name, right? And so if you're doing something, like it's relevant. And so even if it doesn't get views, like you put up there what you want. And I think that's a better way of doing it sustainably, because a lot of people are like, oh, I want to have a big YouTube channel. I want to be successful. And they'll go hard for like a month, 2 months, and there's not those results. So you need some external or some different motivation, I think, to do it. And if it's interesting and fun, that's for me what it is.
You can also always change your name to Nate McBobgorge. It's like this is my name now. So middle name the. All right. Well, let's get into the fun question. So I actually do want to ask you about the coolest random locations you visited. You mentioned the one in Delaware. Even though you haven't finished that one, that's the coolest one. So since that was the coolest one, is there one where you were kind of disappointed by it? You went there as like, oh, this is truly a random location, and it's how do I kind of make this entertaining?
Yeah, I think New Jersey and Maryland were two where it just kind of came out to be like on the side, or I think Maryland was actually on an highway on-ramp. And New Jersey was just on the side of the road. So it's like drive, stand, go back in the car. And so for those, it's like, it's the journey, not the destination. I think those are probably some of the shorter ones, but in New Jersey, we went to like a nature preserve right by the point, and you have to get a feel for the area. That's the whole objective of the series, is to see somewhere where you wouldn't otherwise go. And so I think, there's no such thing as a boring point as much as it is just like, okay, it's a boring point, but the whole adventure can be boring.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So I know you're a fan of the game GeoGuessr. When I first met you, you were playing that game. So if you had MrBeast financing you, and you could pick a random location in a certain region or city in any country, which country would you choose?
I think I'd go Afghanistan, as long as I have a MrBeast security detail, because it's such a beautiful country. I don't know, there's not a lot of content or like guides or anything about Afghanistan, at least from the modern era. It was part of the hippie trail of people from like the UK and the US coming through to India overland. But Afghanistan has some of the most impressive scenery, I think, of any country.
Yeah, I could see that. I was kind of expecting something far-flung as an answer from you. That kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever watched the old Vice videos, but they did a trip to North Korea. That was a good one. They did a trip to Ukraine, and kind of, I think it's the Wolves of Chernobyl. That was one of the.
I've seen some of those. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of those ones are the far-flung places are cool, but yeah, kind of like you were trying to do with the random locations. I was trying to, for the vacations I've been on too, like it might be something that is pretty common to see, like elephants. That is a popular tourist thing to do in Asia, or specifically Southeast Asia, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. But I'm very lucky that I could afford to do that. But if you want to check it out, and like maybe one day it's like, oh, this guy went to Thailand and he got to feed elephants watermelons and he got to bathe them.
Yeah.
Super cool thing. And it goes back to like one of the things I want to do is I want to look back like 10 years from now. It's like, oh yeah, the hanging out with elephants was pretty cool.
Yeah, I did that, and here's proof type thing. Like, because otherwise, it blends into your memories and you don't forget about it, but it's nice to have like the empirical evidence of what actually happened.
Yeah. And it's like nothing is more information dense than video. And it is really cool to look back on it. Okay, last question. If you could collaborate with MrBeast on a video, what would you focus on?
I mean, I think if I'm collaborating with him, if it's like a working together process, I got to kind of factor in his mindset.
The algorithm.
I think what it would have to be is like giving people money to clean up an area. Because I think there are like those cleanup videos that do well in like, especially in like Southeast Asia, where you have really like polluted waterways and people go in and they take out all the trash. And so I think like a MrBeast trash cleanup style philanthropy video would be a good one. We pick some areas and go for it. It's not exactly groundbreaking or interesting, but I think we could make something happen there.
Yeah, gamify it. Whoever collects the most gets some sort of prize. I get it. Mm-hmm. Okay, Nate Wooding, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast. I didn't even realize. I just looked at the time. It's been like over 90 minutes. So
yeah, we just hit an hour and a half. So this is the longest podcast yet.
Let's go. I broke a record.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
So no Mexican cowboy comes stepping up to me, saying, "Now you young fella, how would you love to go if you spend another season with me in Mexico?" Lord, I according to your wages and according to your pay. So I'm paying you good wages, oh, from 2 to 4. If you spend another season with me in Mexico. In this way, goes on that old steamboat back to home they go. How the bells it did ring, the whistles they did blow. How the bells it did ring, the whistles they did blow. Ain't I got